Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carol Fleck, and on behalf of the Attitude team, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's ADHD experts presentation titled The 20-Something Guide to Living with ADHD. Leading today's presentation is Dr. Sharon Saline. Dr. Saline is a clinical psychologist, consultant, international speaker, and award-winning author. She is also a dear friend and longtime contributor to Attitude. She specializes in working with children, teens, emerging adults, and families touched by ADHD, anxiety, learning differences, and more. Her unique perspective as a sibling in an ADHD home and decades of experience guide her in moving families and adults toward effective communication and closer connection. In today's webinar, we'll discuss the joys and challenges facing emerging adults and their caregivers. As we know, the 20s are a time of major transition. Young adults are learning how to juggle the demands of work, finances, medication management, dating and relationships, roommates and housing, and more. At the same time, caregivers are learning when to offer advice and when to provide support without giving advice. We'll explain strategies today that will help young adults and their parents navigate this new and exciting journey to independence. Finally, the sponsor of this webinar is Inflow. Inflow is the #1 app to help you manage your ADHD. Developed by leading clinicians, Inflow is a science-based self-help program based on the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy. Join Inflow today to better understand and manage your ADHD. Click the link on your screen to learn more. Attitude thanks our sponsors for supporting our webinars. Sponsorship has no influence on speaker selection or webinar content. So without further ado, I'm so pleased to welcome Dr. Sharon Saline. Thank you so much for joining us today and for leading this discussion.
Thank you, Carol, for that lovely introduction. And as usual, I'm thrilled to be here with Attitude for a really important topic, which is how to live with ADHD in your 20s. And I'll do my best to offer tips both for you, people who are watching who are in your 20s, and I'm guessing for parents who have kids who are emerging adults as well. Let's start off with a key question. What is emerging adulthood? So this is a new life stage that didn't really exist for previous generations. And it begins after the age of 18, and it typically ends with socioeconomic independence, usually in the mid to late 20s, and sometimes in the early 30s for those with neurodivergence. I think the question that we want to ask is, what is adulthood? This definition differs according to culture, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and religion. People in their 20s, you're learning how to manage yourself with respect to showing up when you're supposed to, assessing situations, gauging your words and your actions accordingly. What are the characteristics of emerging adulthood? So the questions of adolescence: who am I? Where do I belong? What do I believe? What matters to me? What am I capable of? These questions are still quite important in our 20s. How do I address my challenges? And in fact, Dr. Jeffrey Arnett has done a lot of research about this particular life stage, and he's come up with 5 aspects of emerging adulthood. That it's an age of identity exploration, experimentation, sex, drugs, rock and roll, identity explorations in terms of race, gender, sexuality, work, purpose, and religion. This is all very common. It's also an age of instability. These identity explorations create uncertainty and changing situations as you experiment with who you are and where you want want to be. And maybe you move out of your family home and into a different housing situation. And then you have to move back to the family home. Then you have a job, and then that job ends and you have a different job. It's common to have multiple jobs during the 20s and move away from the house again and perhaps back. They're shifting friends and romantic relationships, as well as, again, this sense of moving around. There's a self-focus in this period. It's a period between reliance on parents and sort of the newfound adult commitments to work and love. You're trying to balance competing demands on attention. There's often a feeling of overwhelm. You're experimenting with life skills and new experiences, processing meaning, learning how to maneuver in the world with money and healthcare, managing substances, developing self-understanding and judgment as well. There's a feeling of in-betweenness. You're in between. You're not an adolescent, but you're not fully on your own as an adult, perhaps in the way that you would like to be, or your culture defines that. So you could feel like you have one foot in both worlds. And this can be both confusing and frustrating. And of course, the effects of racism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, and poverty affect your ability to adult in the way that you would like. And lastly, there's a sense of future possibilities, dealings with openings and disappointments, understanding that there are still, the things are still open and you're hopeful in some ways. And on the other hand, you may feel disappointed and confused. So it's a very complicated and confusing time. Next slide, please. So we know, I'll do the next slide. Here we go. We know that there is no single path to adulthood. And this is particularly true for those people who are neurodivergent. And, you know, many people with ADHD can be what used to be called, a term I don't like, late bloomers. You know, with, maybe you don't go to college right away. Maybe you wait 5 or 10 years until you've done other things and experimented and explored and gotten to know yourself better. Maybe you decide college isn't for you at all, that you want to do some sort of vocational training. And I think it's important to remember that college isn't the only option for people. You might work and find yourself really enjoying the work that you're doing and being promoted. Some people take a gap year between high school and college, which actually can then lead them into a field of something that they're interested in. Some people choose the military. And one of the things that's challenging for a lot of 20-somethings is that they feel parental pressure sometimes for being a particular way and choosing a particular field. So let's do our first poll. What does success at this stage of life look like to you? If you would launch that poll, please, I would appreciate it. And it can look like organization and time management, achieving high grades if you're in school, turning work in and on time, at whether it's school or at your job, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm assuming that the poll has been launched. And so I'm going to go on to the next slide while you're answering the question. What are some of the characteristics of Generation Z? That's you guys who are watching. One of the defining features of your generation are screens. These affect social life, entertainment, consuming material goods, and education. And researchers wonder about the link between higher online usage and increased rates of depression and anxiety. It's important for adults who are not you 20-somethings to remember that virtual reality is your reality. It's an equal reality. And I think for a lot of times, older people who are older than their 20s, particularly in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, or 70s, may feel like, online is not real. And that's not really the case for how you were raised. You're a generation who wants to work to live, not live to work. You hope for a more work-life balance than previous generations, and you want your work to be an expression of yourselves and to fit with your interests and abilities and be satisfying. So you have high expectations for your work, which means that there can be higher disappointment levels. Understanding and accepting differences is essential to the values of your generation, and you're vocal about your views, politically and otherwise. You seek adventures and exploring the world, and you advocate for justice, social, racial, gender, etc., work justice, immigration rights. And you're under a lot of stress because nothing is for sure. It's hard to envision a future sometimes, and that can be confusing. Do we have the poll results yet, Carly? I'm going to head forward, and then we'll find out when the poll results emerge.
Sharon, we do have our poll results. If you click on the surveys tab, you should see the answer choices.
There we go.
Perfect.
Okay, I want to send these to the audience. Okay, yep. So now you can see them. So the number one thing that success looks like for you is organization and time management. Interesting. The second is career advancement. Awesome. And the third would be having an active social life. Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right. How do I get out of this? I'm going to go back to the slides. While we're paused, I'm going to ask Carly to share with you a free gift that I've created. It's a downloadable for you. She's sharing the link and the QR code, I believe. So please paste this into your browser, and you'll sign up to receive the free downloadable gift that I will summarize a lot of what I'm talking about here, so you have something to hold on to and refer back to and reflect on afterwards. So let's look at the ethnic breakdown of this generation. Generation Z is more racially and ethnically diverse than previous generations. 52% are non-Hispanic whites. 25% are Hispanic or Latinx folks. 14% are Black or African American, 6% Asian, and 5% mixed. And Generation Z is less likely than millennials to be immigrants, but more likely to be the children of immigrants. And they're on track to be the best educated generation ever. 57% of Generation Z are enrolled in some type of college education, compared to 52% of millennials in 2003 and 43% of Generation X in 1987. You're navigating more complex identity exploration and confusion, and it's important for you that the adults that you interact with or the people you work with are open to discussions of race identity and experience and are transparent about their level of familiarity with these issues. In terms of sex and gender identification in emerging adulthood, about 5.6% of adults in the United States identify as LGBTQIA. The vast majority of Generation Z adults who identify as LGBTQIA, 72%, also see themselves as bisexual. About 1 in 6 adult members of Generation Z consider themselves as something other than heterosexual. And gender is no longer considered something that is neatly sorted into male and female categories. There's been a cultural revolution that has occurred. And people can, choose from like 70 gender categories. And the Common App for college, as you probably are aware of, gives an option for naming a different gender than what was assigned at birth. The transgender movement in this country is a social justice and diversity topic that came of age in the social media era. Generation Zers feel more free to express themselves and use gender as another way to create their identity. It's more fluid and experimental. And this is different than sexual orientation, which is who you are sexually attracted to based on their own sex or gender in relationship to your own. Of course, if we're talking about ADHD, we have to just touch on executive functioning skills. Yours are still developing. The last executive functioning skill to coalesce in the mid to late 20s is self-evaluation, or what we call metacognition. Thinking about thinking, self-awareness, judgment, decision-making. We know that executive functioning skills is a term that's used to describe the directive capacities of the brain right here behind our forehead. And it's the command center of the brain that connects, prioritizes, and integrates cognitive functions moment by moment. We all have executive functioning strengths and challenges. And everybody with ADHD has significant executive functioning challenges that are often more severe and debilitating than for those people who do not have ADHD. The more severe the executive functioning challenges are, the higher the likelihood there is of a learning disability. These are responsible not just for integrating memory with what we see and think about right now, but for self-regulation. And when we're tired or stressed, our weakest executive functioning skills are hit first. So neurodivergent adults are managing yourself with respect to showing up when you're supposed to, assessing situations, gauging your words and your actions accordingly, developing tools for managing your emotions, tidal waves of big feelings such as anxiety, anger, sadness, or disappointment, so that you're responding effectively in a professional situation or in a situation with housemates or with friends. You're building an awareness of your personal social needs for interaction and alone time, how to balance that. And you're now taking responsibility for managing your medications and taking them. We know that pills don't teach skills, so you still have to work on shoring up those executive functioning challenges, leaning into your strengths and getting help with the things that you're challenged with. But medication can make you more available to learn and retain your some tools. And recently I attended the research conference related to ADHD called APSARD. And one of the things that they emphasized repeatedly in terms of the best measure of long-term outcome for adults with ADHD is the combination of properly prescribed medication with cognitive behavioral therapy and tools that can come from coaching or from counseling. So routines will really help you develop the executive functioning skills that you need. Predictability can be very comforting because, understanding cause and effect relationships assist you in developing consistency and persistence. It's great to think about how to create a routine and weed out the things that don't matter and keep in the things that do, so you can stay on track. They don't have to be rigid, but they have to make sense to your brain. And think simple. Talk about following a simple plan more often than not, allowing for some exceptions, but knowing that the goal is steadiness. So yes, you want to get to work by 9 a.m. every day. And if one day you get there at 9:15, maybe Tuesday is your day, you decide I can get there at 9:15, then you get there at 9:15. If that's okay with your work situation. If not, then you can't do that. But you really want to figure out what are some of the most important things that I need a routine for and to follow through on. And it's okay to ask for help in setting this up. We want to set realistic goals and focus on maintaining and establishing supports to get you to where you want to be, either through friends or caring adults or coaches or therapists or other people. Reduce your expectations based on comparisons to neurotypical peers. You will need more time to complete things, to figure out some of the nuances of adulting because of your ADHD brain. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with this. And part of the problem is the judgments that you tell yourself, and instead of accepting it and saying, it's going to take me a little longer because of how my brain is structured. In some ways, I'm ahead over here, and here I need a little more support because this is my weaker area. I'm not so great with time management, but I'm really good with organization, for example. So how do we do this? We set up scaffolding, right? So scaffolding isn't about making excuses. It's about facilitating learning and making adjustments for your executive functioning weaknesses. So I want you to have one simple thing that you think about. Do more of what works. That's it. You're going to do more of what works and slowly focus on one area of improvement at a time. So I'm doing things that are working, and then there's something I'd like to change. There's probably 3 things I'd like to change, but I'm just going to pick one because the likelihood of me doing better on one thing is much higher than if I'm trying to do 3 things.
You love podcasts, the stories, the laughs, the unexpected turns. But when this episode ends, the silence starts. Not anymore. Audiobooks.com turns that silence into your next great adventure. With over 450,000 titles, from bestsellers to hidden gems, your love for listening just found its new best friend. And because you already know the joy of audio, we're giving you 3 free audiobooks to start your journey. Imagine your favorite podcast, now with unlimited episodes. That's audiobooks.com. Keep the story going. Sign up for your free trial at audiobooks.com/podcastfree today. Because for podcast lovers like you, the end of an episode is just the beginning. That's audiobooks.com/podcastfree.
We want to, for parents, we have to manage our own feelings. Our kids who are emerging adults are going to push back. That's what they're supposed to do. They're trying to figure things out for themselves. We have to work on our discomfort of letting them try things on their own, of letting them try, stumble, regroup, try again. And that is, I think, one of the hardest things about parenting 20-somethings, emerging adults, that there is for parents. Jared, age 23, says, when I was younger, like in 12th grade, I didn't want anybody's help. I wanted to do everything on my own. I was kind of a cocky kid. But now I know that even though I'm independent, I need help sometimes. I can't always do it alone. So what are some keys for healthy adulthood? So we want to set a goal and work towards it. So we want to respond thoughtfully to challenges that we face and regroup instead of putting ourselves down for having them. Don't let the gremlins get to you. That negative voice inside of you has probably too much power. And, I work with somebody and that voice has a name, and that voice is called Stupid Steve. And there's another voice, and that voice is called Smart Steve. And these two are constantly in dialogue, often with Stupid Steve being much bigger, brawnier, and winning the sort of arguments or discussions than Smart Steve. We want to build up Smart Steve. So we want to believe that you're good enough and have personal value regardless of your accomplishments. Your accomplishments or lack thereof are not who you are. You are a person of love and value, okay? This means being compassionate with yourself. If you talk to yourself kindly, congratulations. Most people I work with ADHD do not talk to themselves kindly. They have their own version of Stupid Steve in their head. And what I want to encourage you to do is to think about what your beloved grandmother or grandfather or your first grade teacher or somebody in your life would say to you when you were having a hard time. What would you say to a third grader with a skin knee? That's how you need to start to talk to yourself. This means that you're creating your own definition of success based on your interests, capabilities, and resources. Now, I'm going to introduce a concept that I think is really important, both for you as a 20-something and for your parents or who's ever watching as a family member. Connected independence. Connected independence is what we're aiming for. This is when you see that caring adults can assist you or offer advice when you seek it. You feel like someone has your back. They have empathy for your situation. You're living your own life, but you have emotional or physical or, how to fill out the tax form help if you need it. They're there for you, but they're not running the show. You do not have to make this transition through your 20s alone, and you probably shouldn't. How are you going to know how to manage healthcare and apply for healthcare if you've never done it before? What do you do if you go to the emergency room and you have this big bill? How do you deal with that? That's part of what knowing caring adults is for, including parents. So this is a broader definition of connected independence, and it occurs when you are working with your parents on your terms, rather than them telling you what you should or should not do. It's common for you to struggle with what you want and how to get there. And while sometimes your decisions can be confusing and stressful, good friends, a trusted coach or therapist, or other caring adults can be really helpful. There's no shame in asking. There's shame in not asking and not learning. There's a trend among 20-somethings I've seen to cut their parents out of their lives. Now, cutoffs create wounds that continually fester and never heal. In some extreme situations of neglect or abuse, such a separation might be necessary, and I can understand that. But there are many parents who may not agree with some aspects of how you live your life, and you may not agree with some aspects of how they live their life, but they still want to find a way to be connected with you. And there's value for you in staying connected to them. And this is a model for how to do it. It's a framework. So let's look a little bit at some specifics of living with ADHD in your 20s and some of the stressors. So anxiety. So what happens is that the stress of big feelings will negatively affect your already overtaxed executive functioning skills. You'll feel flooded by intense feelings. And so what happens is you'll have these feelings and they'll build up and then they'll override your developing and sometimes more limited executive functioning skills to think about what's going on and gauge the consequences of your behavior. People with ADHD tend to have more severe anxiety reactions than those without it, and more angry reactions than those without it. Of course, weaker working memory, which often comes along with ADHD, makes it managing and responding to this intense rush of emotions even harder, because you can't retrieve past successes and apply them to the present. Now, in terms of anxiety, many adults with ADHD may not meet the diagnostic criteria for a full anxiety disorder, but you still can experience, intense emotional dysregulation, procrastination, social anxiety, etc. What we want to try to do is wonder instead of worry. Have some excitement and curiosity about things instead of projecting a defeat, a negative expectation. Worry says blah, 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 and you can't handle it. But what you could say is, I'm worried, but I'm going to take a risk anyway. I'm wondering how this will work out, instead of, I'm worried this isn't going to work out. So you can reduce anxiety by changing your relationship to it. Identify the goal. I want this, so I'm willing to try this, to take a small step for that. Of course, stress, burnout, and anxiety are things that we experience at different points of our lives. And sometimes in our 20s, this can happen a lot. And I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the difference between stress and burnout and what you can do about them. So stress occurs when there's too much pressure on your mind and your body. It's a matter of too much. When people are stressed, they're wondering about finding a trick to figure out how to get their lives under control. They may experience physical symptoms and keep searching for a magic solution to make it all go away. Persistent stress actually leads to burnout over time. You give so much until there's nothing left to give. And burnout reflects a deficiency. It's a matter of not enough. You lack energy or resources because you're depleted and you're feeling hopeless. You're not motivated. You're exhausted. Reducing overwhelm by pausing or giving yourself time to think before agreeing to doing something, scheduling adequate downtime to integrate and process information between experiences, and doing more of what you will enjoy will not only help you feel less stressed, it'll push away the possibility of burnout. Setting up routines for eating, sleeping, personal hygiene, doing the laundry, spending time with friends will reduce the sense of drowning, which is a key element of stress. You want to decrease the too muchness of your life. Recovering from burnout differs, however, because those issues relate more to feeling empty, overburdened, or unsatisfied. Isolation, shame, and self-criticism are common denominators for people who experience burnout. And so burnout is often the result of an imbalance in the work-life ratio in your life, which can include extracurricular activities as well. So we need to set some limits on that and actually pick an activity or something that makes you happy, no matter how small, and bring that into your life. Because recovering from burnout is active self-care and a healthy lifestyle. We talked a little bit about anxiety before, but I want to say something about overwhelm freeze. So overwhelm freeze is related to intense stress based on weaker executive functioning skills that impact planning, arranging, and executing. The brain experiences your endless to-do list as a threat, and so the body responds accordingly with fight, flight, or freeze. High stress levels, based on the belief that you can't do all of these things, start to become the norm and wear you down. Wear down your resistance. You're more likely to get sick. Wear you down emotionally, more likely to feel anxious consistently, and then if that's untreated, it will lead to depression. So in order to help with anxiety and overwhelm freeze, slow things down. Reduce the size of a task. Zoom out to get some perspective. Talk to your friends to help you when you're on the edge. Like when my hand is up here, because it's like I think about like being like I'm on the ceiling, like I'm gripped onto the ceiling. I needed some help today and I called someone. She was super helpful. She read this email that I sent. She's like, "Oh, it's fine. Don't worry." I was like spinning out. Don't worry. I was like, okay, I won't worry. I know you're not supposed to reassure someone with anxiety, but having her read the letter and say, "This letter is fine. You are clear. You owned your thing. You let it rest. You can let it rest." I took that in as "Don't worry, it's okay," but that's not actually what she said, and it was quite helpful. So how do we transform anxiety? We're going to focus on curiosity. Anxiety is experienced cognitively, physically, and psychologically. So there's all or nothing thinking. There's distorted beliefs. There's physiological signs, a knot in your stomach, your chest tightens. These are signals to you that anxiety is on its way. So we want to pay attention to those signals so that we can change our response to the trigger. Triggers will happen all the time. It's what we do in response to those triggers that makes the difference. This is why we want to name our hope. I want to make a friend at work, so I'm willing to sit at a table where I don't know folks at lunch and say hi. Anxiety reflects all or nothing thinking and a negative expectancy. It has to do with feeling uncomfortable and being unable to tolerate uncertainty. That is something that you can practice. Feeling uncomfortable means you're living. You're on the right direction. We want to identify what's helped us in the past when we're uncomfortable and see if some of those tools can be applied to this. One of the traps people get into with anxiety is trying to solve the content of a particular problem. We want to zoom out and look at the pattern of how anxiety operates rather than zoom in to what its fearful demands are. So let's clarify the goals and what you need at this stage in your life. Here you are in your 20s. Ask yourself these questions. What do you want for yourself? What would help you feel confident and steady? Could your parents, friends, or other caring adults help with your goals, and in what way? What would it be like to ask them? If I'm not satisfied with my housing or work, how can I make a change? Do I have friends? If not, would I like some more? How do I go about doing that? And if I'm using substances, what am I trying to avoid? Am I numbing myself? So let's launch the second poll. What aspects of being an adult are you struggling with the most? Carly, if you can launch that, that would be great. Okay, great. Let's launch into some, speaking of launching, into some solutions. So what are 7 essential tools to help you create the life you want? It's easy to feel overwhelmed, to give up or procrastinate. Let's try these. Ask for and accept help when you're stuck. Understanding your limitations and learning how to manage them is a strength. It is not a weakness. A growth mindset nurtures resilience because you try something, you see what happens, you continue if it's working, and you pivot if it doesn't. But a growth mindset also often relies on mentors, caring colleagues, friends, parental figures to help you when you don't know how to proceed. There is no shame in asking. There's shame in suffering. You don't need to suffer. Be accountable. Learn how to show up on time for things by managing time more effectively. I'm not great with time management. I have analog clocks. I have a time timer. My watch is on an analog system. I have alerts and notifications that I set on my phone for all kinds of things. Write down things that will help improve your working memory. If you have some things that you want to make sure that you get to and you're not sure you'll remember, write it down. There are some great apps that will help you with that. I like the To-Do one. I think it's a Microsoft app, but you can check it off and you get a little ping when you do. I love that. Prioritize your tasks, your chores and activities by determining what's urgent, time related, and what's important, value related. Okay. So then you want to manage your big feelings more successfully by being able to take a pause to notice when you're having those physical reactions. Slow down, slow things down. And the way you're going to do that is go to the bathroom, wash your face, do some alternate types of breathing, alternate nostril breathing, box breathing. I do something called triangle breathing, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 6, step outside to get some fresh air, make a cup of coffee. You do something that's going to take you away from what is triggering you so that you can regroup. Then you can come back and join again when you're a little more organized. Make sure that you balance your social experiences with Make sure you balance your social interactions with recovery time. When you're growing up, the recovery time is structured for you. When you're an adult, it's up to you. So you can't party all the time. You can't work, party, sleep, work, party, sleep. It's a lot. So you want to really figure out what it is that you need, when you need time by yourself, and what do you want to do with that time. Manage your physical and mental health. You can probably know that if you don't eat well and you don't get enough sleep and you don't regularly take your ADHD medication, then you're going to struggle. What can you do to help with this? Well, you can get, a box and have your pills every day, place it somewhere so that maybe you carry some medication with you in case you forget. Have a time each week where you fill that pill box. Consider finding a coach or a therapist to help you improve your executive functioning skills, clarify your goals, figure out steps to getting towards them and to changing ineffective habits. Create a healthy routine with a balanced diet to keep your mood and your sleep regular. Negotiate conflict using active listening and reflecting tools. You in your 20s, you're living with other people, most likely. You don't have enough money to have a beautiful studio apartment or wherever you might be living. And so you're probably living with housemates or at work. People are going to come into your life that you may not like, or you may just feel very distant from and you don't understand. It's important to learn how to communicate clearly with these people without blame and listen without judgment. So when your noisy night owl housemates disrupt your sleep, yelling at them is not going to help. Instead, explain how their actions are impacting you and your work, and then spend some time figuring out a solution together. Make a time for a meeting so you can sit down and you can say, I feel frustrated when you're gaming till 2:00 in the mornings very loudly because I have to be up at 7 and that's not enough sleep for me. What can we do to work this out? Listen to what they say, repeat back what you hear, and then state your need again. If they don't get it, I need more than 5 hours of sleep. What can we do to solve this problem? The goal is a good compromise, actually one where nobody gets everything they want, but the plan is good enough. Okay, sorry about this. Oh, wait. The final thing that I wanted to say, is about befriending your finances. So finances are complicated, no matter what age you are for some people. And learning how to manage your finances is a big step. Maybe you've never made a budget before. Maybe you've never filled out a tax form. Maybe you don't know what a bank statement looks like, et cetera, et cetera. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with you for that. Ask for help. Perhaps sit down and see if someone at the bank can meet with you to figure it out. Talk with a family member, even a parent. How do you fill out your taxes? Can you show me? What is it like to balance your credit, to check out your credit and your credit score, and how do you balance your accounts and your budget to make sure that you have enough to live on? These are tough things to do, and most people figure them out by the seat of their pants, and it doesn't always work out so well, particularly for those people with ADHD. So moving forward, I'd like you to use what I call the PREPS method. Pursue services and ask for help if you need them. Represent yourself fairly. Don't shortchange yourself, and don't think that because you need help, there's something wrong with you. There's a lot of services that are available for people who are neurodivergent from the Americans with Disabilities Act, and you might have rights that you're not even aware of. Educate yourself and others about ADHD and executive functioning skills and what types of supports will help you in various situations. Plan for what you need. Don't hope that because you needed something in college, you're not going to need it now, 2 years later at work. You probably will, because it might be the same sort of executive functioning challenge of planning and prioritizing. And of course, set aside that shame and really focus on growing, because that's what we're here for. We're learning and we're growing. Carly, can you post another link to my handout again, please? Thank you. So what we're here doing is we're nurturing your resilience. Resilience is the antidote to shame. And shame tells you something about who you are. And guilt says it's about something you did. So shame tells you that you're a bad person. Guilt tells you that what you did wasn't a good choice. I'm not really big in the goods and the bads, but that's generally what people think about when they think about shame and guilt. So resilience occurs when we take our skills from situations in the past where we learned or succeeded at something and apply them to a new situation. You will struggle. We all did. And that's how we build competency. Okay? So for parents, I have a little guide for you moving forward. First of all, I'd like you to meet your adult kids where they are, not where you think they should be. Use humor and compassion. Acknowledge positive experiences and progress to nourish their inner strengths. Build resilience by letting them know you see them growing and changing, and work with them to solve problems in their lives. If they come to you with a question, that means they're coming to you with a question. They want to work with you for the answer. They don't want you to tell them what to do. Here are some tools essential tools for parents of 20-somethings. Listen with genuine curiosity. Pick your battles very carefully. Maintain perspective and stay steady. And consider what you were like in your 20s and keep it separate from what they are, because it's a different time and they're different people. When should you worry? When should you get help for yourself or recommend help for your child? Here are your red flags. Okay? Not going to work or classes consistency, late a lot of the time. Trouble getting out of bed or oversleeping, not sleeping enough. Spending a lot of time alone, experiencing panic attacks, avoiding doing important things, not showering or eating, partying too much, self-medicating with drugs or alcohol. These are times when it is important for you to seek professional services. Okay, well, I thank you so much. I am going to wrap things up right now for questions. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. And again, please download your gift. Carly, if you can post that for everyone to see, that would be great. And I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Saline. Now, before we start the Q&A, I'd like to thank Inflow once more for sponsoring this webinar. Now to your questions. How can I navigate getting an actual ADHD diagnosis as a young adult when my parents don't believe they have ADHD?
Well, that's a very good question. You know, your parents are separate from you. And if your parents don't believe in ADHD or they don't believe they have ADHD, that's okay. You can still get your own diagnosis. And I would encourage you to meet with someone who's knowledgeable about ADHD. You could start with your primary care provider and get a referral for a psychologist or a psychiatrist. If you want to be tested to get an evaluation, that's possible too. And your primary care should be able to send you to any of those people. One of the things that I learned at this conference that I attended, and Carol, you were there too, it was so interesting, is that adult ADHD fluctuates. You know, that there'll be periods where you're really on top of your game and everything seems great and you're in the flow. And then there'll be periods where you're really struggling and things aren't working out. And it can be, you know, several good days and then some bad days. It could be several really positive weeks and then more difficult weeks. The important thing is that you trust your own instinct and you seek to get the diagnosis you need, regardless of what other people think. And a proper diagnosis will be informative and will include a range of rating scales, a good history taking, and sometimes psychoeducational or a neuropsych evaluation.
Okay. One person writes, now that my young adult daughter is living on her own and she's dating, how can I help her to stay safe?
That's a great question. The dating world is so different than when I was growing up. And a lot of dating, a lot of connections happen online. And so I think there are just some basic rules of safety that we want to encourage our, if we're a parent, our kids to do. And if you're an adult, a 20-something adult, you're probably familiar, but it's good to hear them again, which is, spend time getting to know a person, chatting with them before you meet them in person. Meet them in a public place a couple of times. Don't go back to their house or bring them back to yours alone until you've had this extra time. Maybe bring a friend or set something up with some friends so you can have someone else suss them out. I know a lot of people meet someone online and, they connect and then they meet up at a cafe and then they go home and they do whatever they do in their houses. And that's fine. It's just a little more dangerous. And so if you are going to meet someone in person that you've connected with online, maybe let your friends or your housemates know where you're going and the name of this person or any contact information you have about this person, just to be safe.
Okay, another question is, my 24-year-old just got his first job and he's moving into his own apartment. I'm worried he'll forget to take his stimulant medication every day. What can we do to ensure he continues to take his medication as directed?
Well, first of all, I want to say congratulations. That's so great. Has a job, is moving into an apartment. Far out. That's wonderful. Congratulations. I think sitting down with him and talking about what his plan is. What is your plan for taking your medication regularly? The 20-somethings that I work with usually have two plans. Sometimes they have a pill box that they keep next to their bed or in some very visible location, like on the sink. So when they brush their teeth, they see it and they take their pills. And sometimes they may also carry some of their medications with them, a few tablets or capsules during the day in case they forget that one in the morning. Or they may have medication that they take twice during the course of a day. They take 2 short acting instead of a long acting. I think the main thing is to just talk with him about his plan and then perhaps check in very neutrally, very calmly in a few weeks and saying, how's it going with that medication plan we came up with? That's really all you can do.
Okay. How do I help my child navigate fraternity life and college parties as an ADHD male with alcoholism in his family?
That is a huge question. So you can lead the horse to water, but you cannot make the horse drink, so to speak. Nor can you control how much the horse is drinking. What you can do is have frank conversations, not hysterical, not finger wagging, you should beware, blah, 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 but rather, I'm concerned because of this pattern in our family. How are you managing drinking in fraternities? How are you going to manage your intake? Because I know there's a lot of social pressure. When you ask questions that start with how, what, where, and when, you're much more likely to open a conversation than with why, And so in this situation, we want to give information, and then we have to step back. We are not at the fraternity. We're not watching. We can only hope that they'll think a little bit more carefully about what they're doing. And if you are noticing that their grades are slipping and they're struggling, then you can step in. And that might be a time for you and your child and your partner, if they're in the picture, to maybe meet with someone at the school or a counselor to talk about your concerns.
Someone asks, can you comment on sleep issues for young adults with ADHD? My child goes to bed at 4 a.m. and I'm worried he won't be able to get up for work.
That's a reasonable worry. That's his problem, though. And I know what I'm saying is really hard for you as parents. I'm a parent of 20-somethings. I'm going to tell you this is hard for me, okay? But if your child goes to bed at 4 o'clock in the morning and has to get up for work, that's actually his problem. Eventually, he'll have to learn, I can't go to bed at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm not able to get up for work, or I've gotten some warnings at work that I'm going to be on probation. So I have to get my act together. And maybe there's a biological reason. There could be delayed sleep onset. That's worth talking about with your primary care provider. But again, we want to talk about our concern and brainstorm an idea. And if they say, I've got it under control, stop worrying, then step back and wait, and then maybe approach it again and see what's going on, particularly if you see them and they look exhausted.
That addresses a lot of or quite a few questions we got around supportive versus enabling. How can we be supportive without being enabling when a child, a young adult, isn't doing what he or she is supposed to be doing, or you see some red flags about their behavior?
It's such a fine line, Carol, because we love our children and we come from a generation of parenting where we're very hands-on, we're very involved. And yet the task of being in your 20s is that connected independence. I'm doing my own thing and I come back to touch base, and then I'm off doing my own thing and I come back to touch base. And so we have to be that solid base. And so we can express some of our concerns, particularly if we're noticing that they look very tired, they've lost a lot of weight, or they've gained a lot of weight, that they're not living healthfully, or you find out they're not taking their medication. But you can't make your kids do things that you want them to do. You can offer your concern, and then you have to just let them come to it. Think about yourself. Did you do what your parents wanted you to do? Did you follow their directions? I certainly didn't, and this was a big struggle for me in my 20s, was setting those boundaries respectfully. And I think that's what connected independence is about, is having respectful boundaries between emerging adults and their parents.
One person asks, how can I push my child out of the comfy nest to start adulting?
That's a great question. So we do see that a lot of 20-somethings come back home after whatever they do after college. After high school, whether that's college or a training program, or, for a lot of people with ADHD, emerging adults, it's very difficult to do college, to do school and life at the same time. So they can do school, but they can't and do fine, and they can do life and do fine, but together it's too much. So they come home to live while they go to school. That can be very helpful. And sometimes it's the same thing. I've gone to school, I come home, I can't afford to live on my own. I have a job, but I'm still, I don't have enough money to live on my own. Plus, my mom's doing my laundry, my dad empties the trash, life is pretty good. And so I think the thing that you want to do is have a conversation about timing. Now that you're doing blah, 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 when do you think it would be time for you to start to look for your own place? And what would that look like? That's one way to go. And if someone is home and not looking for work and is depressed and is spending a lot of time gaming, then that's another path. And that's a path where I would recommend family counseling, because there are issues going on that are difficult to talk about. And if you talk to your kid about it by yourself, you're going to end up in probably an unhelpful argument. So in those cases, I would really recommend getting some family counseling about how to move on to the next life stage, which is you moving into your own life, into your own world.
Well, unfortunately, that has to be our last question because we're out of time. But Dr. Saline, thank you so much for joining us today and for contributing your expertise to our ADHD community. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And please go to my website, www.drsharonsaline.com, to check out more of my resources on this and other very important topics related to living with ADHD.
And thank you to today's listeners. If you would like to access the event resources, visit attitudemag.com and search podcast 489. The slides and recording are posted a few hours after each live webinar. If you're listening in replay mode, simply click on the episode description. Make sure you don't miss future webinars, articles, or research updates by signing up to receive our free email newsletters at attitudemag.com/newsletters. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
For more Attitude Podcast and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.
Ever tried reading while jogging, cooking, or even juggling flaming torches? Yeah, it doesn't end well. But with audiobooks.com, you can conquer books without the circus act. Dive into over 450,000 titles, including more than 10,000 free ones. Get hooked on a bestseller, find your next obsession, or finally read that classic you've been avoiding since high school. And here's the inside scoop. Sign up today for a free 30-day trial and snag your first 3 audiobooks on the house. Sign up for your free trial at audiobooks.com/podcastfree today. That's audiobooks.com/podcastfree.